I guess I want to pick up briefly on a couple of sort of the high-level points before we get back to some of the detail on the services side. And this is sort of the narrative that we are developing around why the TPP is significant and what's going to be most effective in terms of making the case going forward, particularly in Congress. And, you know, speaking to a services audience, you know, the case has already been made in many respects, but one of the, you know, missing pieces, it seems to me, consistently in the way people talk about the TPP is on services, clearly, and the focus on the supposed negative impacts of the agreement on really a small section of the manufacturing sector. Brad, have you know, clearly pointed out, you know, and we've all sort of made the point that the services sector is really the key driver of growth, innovation, jobs, etc. in the US economy. The manufacturing sector is approximately 12% of GDP, 9–10% of jobs, yet gets a very outsized focus, and there's understandable political reasons for some of that at some level. But it's not clear to me, though, why there is not, firstly, a lot more push by the administration and really everyone who has a responsibility for making the case about the significance of services and what more we can do on that front. Any other views you might have of what more could be done to sort of make a coherent case for Congress going forward?
I mean, it's a question for
I was going to say, the problem is it's political, right? And when you think about manufacturing, I was watching the Democrat debate, and it was, the backdrop was Flint, Michigan. Talk about a state that is struggling to find ways to grow jobs again as the automotive sector has declined there. And I'm someone who says we have to think about these issues from the macro as well as the micro perspective. Bottom line is trade on a macro level brings tremendous economic benefits, but you can't dismiss sometimes the micro dislocations that occur, because at the end of the day, these are real people with real families, and we have to find a way to get them back in the trading game. It's why I have been a very big advocate for trade adjustment assistance. I'm a big believer in America. I'm a big believer in the economic opportunity that this country provides, and I'm a big believer in education. And what I know is when you provide trade adjustment assistance to firms, you find ways to get companies back in the exporting game. I don't think we have to just say it's a zero-sum game where Michigan doesn't get the opportunity to grow jobs again. We've got to find ways to help the families and the workers in those communities find the opportunities through additional training and education to get back in the trading games. That's the political problem you have to solve, because on the economics of it, on the fundamental facts, trade is the difference maker in terms of helping people get out of poverty, raising economic development standards, and about fundamentally creating that political stability that all of us know is vital to growth of an economy. And so from that perspective, services is critically important, but you've got important people, individuals, the faces that you can't just look away from and not recognize that there's challenges in manufacturing, but I think the solutions come from addressing them head on and identifying ways to get new training into those new waves of manufacturing or those new services where the United States is competitive, and help get workers into those areas and get them trading with the rest of the world.
So it's a good question, Josh. Why does the manufacturing sector seem to receive this outsized, and ag too? I mean, ag is less than 2% of employment in the United States. So you add them together, you know, the goods producing sector is 10% of the economy in terms of the labor force. So why is it so powerful in the political system? I don't know. I think part of it is it's so damn visible. So I grew up in the suburb of Detroit, and I married a woman who grew up in Cleveland, and for a while we lived in Pittsburgh. So I have seen what technological change and globalization can do to regions, and it's real. And to deny it, you know, to say that this doesn't happen and that trade is good on balance, but not for everyone. And I think for too long, the message was too broad stroke. So there was a loss of credibility. Oh, some industries have been hammered. And it's up to the political process, how are we gonna make that right? And trade adjustment assistance and wage insurance, I think, are reasonable ways, you know, worker retraining, you know, reasonable ways to move in that direction. I once heard a statistic. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars, which sounds like a lot, but we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on worker retraining. We spend $9 billion every year subsidizing access to broadband for rural areas. And so that puts in perspective how much we're spending on worker retraining. Right? I mean, it's a pittance. You know, if you think of the gains from trade that this economy, that this country has reaped over decades, and the small amount that we pay is political insurance, and it's, you know, you pay, I'm sure you pay a lot more on your house and on your car than we collectively pay to ensure the benefits of free trade. So I think that's part of it. I mean, recently I've done some work with some political science colleagues where we've looked at voting behavior and the prevalence, you know, kind of workers' exposure. And what we see is that, I don't know if there's something fundamental or if it's just dumb luck, but a lot of the swing states behave workers because of the prevalence of manufacturing workers in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan, which are big electoral states, and they tend to be up for grabs. They are much more sensitive to trade than other states. And so I think that's helps us move towards thinking about why this sector has outsized influence. It has to do with the electoral map.
I was just going to add a couple things. One is, I think that you know, the point that's been made very well this morning, and that is the underdeveloped potential, export potential of the services industry. I think, unlike manufacturing, where I think workers are much more used to understanding the importance or the value of exports, I think in service industries, that point hasn't been driven home to the same degree because they don't see exports as their bread and butter necessarily. Hopefully that will begin to change because I think it has to change to ensure economic growth. Two, I think we have to continue to do what we do every day, and that's a better job of educating about the importance of services. And I think the statistic that you had, Brad, is pretty astounding. About if you look just at business services, that's 24% of the labor force. I think information like that getting out helps. The other thing I think is significant is the degree to which services and investment are important, both in terms of creating jobs in the United States, but also in terms of outbound investment. And that outbound investment is not taking away US jobs. That outbound investment is creating exports as a result of that investment that wouldn't otherwise exist. It's not a question of a job drain, and I think we need to do a better job of making that point.